Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this evening for the info session for the MA in Psychology program. Tonight's info session is set up as a Q&A, so I'm going to just go really briefly through a couple of very important points to mention about the program and the curriculum and the application process. And then I want to spend the majority of the time answering any questions that you have. So if you don't already have the slides, you will be sent the slide deck and you'll have those to go through a lot more carefully. So I'm not going to spend too much time doing that, but I do think it's important to tell you a little bit about the program itself. So we are part of the CUNY School of Professional Studies, and the school itself is also part of the Graduate School and University Center of the City University of New York. So CUNY has over 24 campuses throughout the 5 boroughs of New York, and we are one of those campuses. We are accredited by Middle States, and that's very important. I would like to just mention that no matter what school you're interested in, please make sure to look at accreditation because it's really important that a school is accredited. It's important for a number of reasons. One, if you plan on ever going to a PhD program, they are going to require that you have credits from an accredited institution. Likewise, accreditation tells you that the school has gone through some kind of vetting process and that it has been scrutinized and examined, and the process is actually quite extensive. And so if a program and a school are accredited, it tells you something about the quality of education that you're going to get there. So at SPS, we are one of 13 master's programs at the school. We also have a bachelor's program in psychology, and that's one of 11 programs at CUNY SPS. But we also have 3 dual degree programs. We have 12 certificate and advanced certificate programs, and we have over 4,000 students at the school. So most of the programs, including the psychology program, are fully online, but we do have some programs that are in person. Psychology just isn't one of them. So in terms of the program itself, we have 2 concentrations currently. We have others in the works that we can't yet talk about until they've gone through the proper channels. However, the 2 tracks that we do have are industrial organizational psychology and developmental psychology. And so they encompass some very important areas in the field and also some very fast growing areas. So industrial organizational psychology is probably the fastest growing of the subfields of psychology. It is the study of human behavior in organizations and in the workplace. So we'll talk a little bit later about where these people will find themselves, but generally these are going to be people who are interested in at least how people function in environments and specifically on the job, looking at things like motivation, job satisfaction, those kinds of issues. And then we have developmental psychology, which is the study of human growth throughout the lifespan. And that spans infancy all the way through adulthood. So I mention that because a lot of people think of developmental psychology as having only to do with children. And that's actually not the case. That would be child development. But our program really focuses on all of the lifespan. So students could be interested in infants or children, but they could also be interested in geriatric care and working with an elderly population. And all of that would be covered by the developmental psychology program. So in terms of who should apply to our program, we really think about our students as falling into one of 3 categories. That doesn't mean that every single person is going to fall into one of these categories, but the majority of our students do. So the first category would be people who are currently in the field now and who need to acquire some kind of special training or credentials to move up in their current positions. So this is usually people who've been working in the field for a really long time, but they can't quite make that jump to management or a director position without advanced credentials. We also have a group of students who are planning on a career in one of these areas, developmental or IO, but they have no prior experience. And so in order to make that leap to a new career, they really need something in between that makes that narrative make sense to a potential employer. And that thing in the middle is the education. And so we have students who've come from legal backgrounds, accounting, social work, you name it. There's a lot of different fields that are represented within our program, or at least fields that they were in before they came to psychology. And then they use this as a way to kind of shift their career to something else. And then the final group of students that we have are those who are planning on moving on to a PhD or a PsyD or some other advanced degree. And they need this program to act sort of as a bridge. And when I say a bridge, it doesn't mean that it's going to go seamlessly into the PhD. Sometimes that helps students and it works. So for example, if a student wanted to move into social psychology and they were applying to the CUNY Graduate Center, they could transfer some of these courses over to that program. They would be vetted by the program at the CUNY Graduate Center, and there's a certain number of transfer credits that could be applied towards their studies there. There are other programs, however, even within CUNY, that do not take any transfer credits from a previous graduate program. They want you to do all of those credits in their program with them. In that case, it's not quite as seamless, but it's still a bridge because in order to get into these programs, they're quite competitive and students need to demonstrate that they can be successful at graduate level work and that they have research experience. And that's one of the things that someone would get going through this program. So it can act as a bridge in that way. And I mentioned that there's sort of other students who fall into other categories. We do have a couple of students who really don't fall into any of these. They're just in the program because they're interested in the topic and they just wanted to learn more about that. So it's more for sort of self-growth, and that's fine too. So our program is 36 credits. Each of our courses is 3 credits. So it's 12 courses and they're broken up into these 5 categories. We have core courses. So every student will take 3 out of the 5 core courses that we offer. You get to pick what those courses are, and students can use that to tailor their learning curriculum to whatever it is they plan on doing in the future. Then there are research courses. There's a research methods course and a statistics course, which are pretty standard in any psychology program that you would go through. A lot of people think about psychology as being sort of this soft, touchy-feely field, and it's one of the things that I like to sort of be clear about up front is that psychology is a very rigorous science. And so research and statistics are a very crucial part of that program. And then students have capstone courses at the very end of their time in the program. It's 2 semesters. The first semester involves planning their thesis and capstone project. And then the second semester is actually executing it, collecting the data, writing it up, and then defending it. Every student takes 3 specialization courses, so 3 IO courses or 3 developmental courses, and those are established what they are, and each student just takes all 3 of them. And then we have elective credits, and they're electives that are tailored to whatever that track is. So I don't want to go over all of these. I'll just sort of click through them so that you could see what some of the courses are. So these are the core courses. These are our research methods and capstone courses. These are the specialization courses with IO at the top and developmental at the bottom. And then here are some of the electives. We are always adding new electives, so there are some being developed right now for each of these tracks. So these are just a couple that we have now. So depending on what you want to do, we would help you plan that path through the program to tailor your courses, your electives, and your core courses to whatever it is that you'd like to do. Many of our students aim to find themselves in human and social services or personnel and training or research and data analysis, but the options are endless. And one of the things that I would suggest to you is to go on to search engines like monster.com and take a look at your particular area. You can enter in your location and also whatever the degree happens to be. So Masters of Psychology, or Masters of IO Psychology or Masters of Developmental Psychology, and it will pull up all of the positions in your area where that is a requirement for the position. And you can see all of the different types of jobs and careers that are available to people who have a graduate degree in psychology. It really is endless. And I think it's eye-opening for students or potential applicants to see that, because there are very narrow ways that people think about psychology, and you know, it really is a very broad field. So in terms of entering our program, we do have specific requirements. All of our students must have a bachelor's degree, and you'll notice the last part, from an accredited institution. So it's important that whatever bachelor's program you went through, that too was accredited. You need to have a personal statement. The personal statement should address what it is that you're interested in studying, why. And you also want to talk a little bit about not just why, but what you're hoping to do with this degree after you finish it. A lot of times when people write the personal statement, they forget to talk about the program and why this program is going to get someone where they need to be. Sorry, I lost the sound just for a second. So one of the things they forget to do is to talk about the program. So they end up talking about themselves a little and their background rather than what it is that they're hoping to do in the future. So if you are planning on applying to the school, that's one thing that I would say is please make sure to address that in your personal statement. We also need a CV or a resume. A CV is your curriculum vitae. It's an academic resume, but we take a resume, that's just fine. So make sure that you update it, make sure that it's current. And then 2 letters of recommendation. I want to go back to the resume for a second. We're not going to call your employers. That's not why it's there. We really want to see what you're doing, what your current position is, what some of your experiences are, because we can use those as we try to make a decision about your fit for the program. We need 2 letters of recommendation. Those must come from a professional or academic source only. So occasionally we get letters from family members, clergy, you know, friends, and or lateral colleagues. So people that you know from work, but who work at your same level. What we really need are people who've supervised you. So in a professional environment, that would be your supervisor, your manager, someone in a higher level position who's looked at your work, or an academic letter of recommendation, because this is an academic program. So if you have a professor, a past professor that you can ask, that would be great. Very important, we need transcripts from all schools that you've ever received credit. It should indicate a cumulative GPA of 3.0. We cannot take just the last transcript of the most recent school. There's a misconception that that final transcript of the last school includes all of the previous transcripts from the schools that you've attended before. And that's actually not accurate. We need to see the grades, and oftentimes when you've transferred courses in, so if you've attended a community college and then you went to a 4-year college afterward, while the 4-year college has your transcript that shows those courses, next to it is usually the letters TR, which means transfer, rather than a grade. And we really need to see all of the grades. Those take time, so make sure to plan ahead, because especially in the era of COVID that we're living in, a lot of businesses, depending on what region you're in the United States or even abroad, are not in the office right now. And so it will take a little bit longer to get these transcripts. Ideally, the school functions with electronic transcripts, and those just take 24 hours, but a lot of schools are still mailing them, and that can be a lengthy process. Sometimes it can take several weeks from the time that you request them to the time that we receive them. We also require 3 pre-admission courses. These are very standard for anyone that's attended a psychology program as an undergrad. So if your background is in psychology, it's highly likely that you have these courses. It's very rare that people don't. Intro to Psych, Statistics, and Research Methods. If you were in another program, let's say a math program or an economics program, you may have statistics, but you don't have research methods. Or if you were in a sociology program, you may have a research methods class, but not the others. What we do in those cases is, assuming everything else looks great in the application and we believe that you're a strong candidate for the program, we will admit you as a conditional admit, and then we require that you take that course or courses in the first semester in the program. If you have 3 courses to take, all 3, we would have you take Intro to Psych first, and then you could take Statistics and Research Methods the second semester. That's also a possibility. But students cannot begin taking graduate level courses until they've completed their pre-admission courses. So I want to just cover a couple of the frequently asked questions, and then I want to turn it over to you for your questions. So students often ask, what if I wasn't a psychology major? Does that matter? And the answer is really no. Psychology is the study of human behavior, and there are lots of different fields where people are engaging in observing and interacting with human behavior all the time. So people bring their past experiences with them, and it's wonderful to have people who have lots of different backgrounds in the program. It can be a real asset. Can I transfer credits to the new degree program? That depends. It depends on whether or not you've attended another master's program with courses that we offer. So if you were in another master's program in psychology and for some reason, especially if it was an in-person program, let's say you're in the military or a spouse is in the military and you had to move, so you couldn't complete that program, it's possible that we could transfer in the credits. We can only take 6 credits or up to 2 classes. So as part of the onboarding, you would be receiving a one-on-one advisement call with the graduate student advisor. Her name is Ms. Nakia Isaac, and she would walk new students through the transfer credit application. It's just a 1-page application. You submit that along with the syllabi for the courses that you want considered. They are reviewed and you get a decision back usually within 5 business days. So you know whether or not that course has been waived and you've been given credit for it. How does online learning work? Online learning functions much the same as in-person learning. You just aren't there physically in person. Our courses are asynchronous, which means that they function on a weekly basis. So pretty standard is a Monday to Sunday schedule. Classes start on Monday, that week closes on Sunday. So whatever needs to be done has to happen in that time. It's not an education that works around your schedule though. And that's one thing I like to make very clear in these Q&A sessions, is that that's a real misunderstanding of what online learning is that you turn things in when you want to, and it's more like correspondence where you do your work, you submit it, and then you get more work. It's not like that at all. Actually, it's a course that runs on the same schedule as the rest of our programs, even in-person programs. It's a 15-week schedule in a regular semester. And you get a syllabus, and weeks 1 through 15 are all lined out for you. And then everyone is moving through the course at the same pace, including the professors. So professors are posting articles, there are constant discussions that are going on. Students are expected to be online 3 to 4 times a week, submitting projects, papers, etc. And likewise, the professor is in the discussions. There's live synchronous office hours. So it ends up feeling like a learning community, and students who are in the program often say they were surprised by how much it felt like they were in a classroom, like they would in a face-to-face classroom, that they didn't feel isolated. They didn't feel like they were just learning on their own. The next question we get a lot is, are there scholarships? And the answer is yes. If you're interested, please go to the financial aid section of our website, and you can look through the different scholarships, see if there are any that you fit the criteria for. There are less scholarships for graduate school rather than undergraduate school, but there are some, and it's worth a look. How long will it take me to finish the program? That's really up to you. We allow students to take as little as 1 class a semester. So if a student were taking 1 class per semester, 1 in the fall, 1 in the spring, no summer school classes, it would take them 6 years to get through the program, but that would be fine. However, most of our students take 2 to 3 classes a semester. And so most people end up finishing the program in 2 to 3 years. Some students also accelerate things a little bit in the beginning, in particular by taking summer classes, but we usually only offer the earlier courses, the core courses and statistics during the summer, not the later, more specialized courses. And then finally, will this program prepare me for licensure? This is a question that comes up a lot for people who are interested in like school psychology or mental health counseling, therapy, things like that. That's not the kind of thing that we do at SPS. If you're interested in school psych, I would go to a school psychology program. If you're interested in mental health counseling or clinical psych or counseling, there are plenty of mental health counseling programs around CUNY that are very good. And those are programs that prepare for licensure. Developmental psychology and IO psychology don't require licensure for most positions. So that's not something that, that we do because it's not necessary. So I'm gonna leave this up for a second, which tells you a little bit more about where to go if you're interested in applying. The easiest way to access the application portal is to go to the MA in Psychology program webpage, and underneath my contact information, or sorry, actually it's above my contact information is an orange button that says apply now, and you can click that and go into the portal. If you want to take a look at the courses, right under my contact information is a button that says curriculum. You can click that and you can read all about all of the different courses that are offered and learn a little bit more about them. So our deadline for applying is November 3rd for priority, for the priority decision. So I can tell you that we already have sent some decisions out for people who have already applied. The earlier people apply, the faster they get a response. The later people apply, the longer it takes, obviously, because a lot of people wait till the end and then we're going through more applications. So if you're interested and you're a planner and you want to know what's happening for you in the spring, if you're going to be starting a new graduate program, you might want to think about applying now or at least in the next week or two, because you'll get a decision usually in about a week. So why don't I turn it over to your questions? I see there are already some. Feel free to add them to the chat or the Q&A and I can answer them there. So someone asked, what level of access will I have to library resources, academic advisors, career counselors, and other campus-based services? Great question. You have access to everything. As a reminder, I had mentioned that we have in-person classes as well, not psychology, but we have other programs are fully in person. And so we have a campus just like any other school would. Our campus is located on 31st Street, for those of you who are familiar with New York City, on 31st Street between 6th Avenue, which is also Avenue of the Americas, and 7th Avenue. So we sit basically between the Empire State Building, which is actually a little bit over toward 5th Avenue, but between the Empire State Building and Penn Station, we're sort of right in that area. And if you know where the famous Macy's is, we're about 2 blocks south of that. So it's a very centrally located campus. You'd be welcome to come take advantage of all of the campus-based services and activities that go on there, including career services. Your academic advisor, every graduate student has an academic advisor. Her name is Miss Nakia Isaac. She handles all of the graduate students, as does our associate director, Dr. Isabel Alicia. And so you would have access to them to talk with or to help with registration, et cetera. And every student who comes into the program has a one-on-one advisement call as part of their onboarding. And they go through you make your plan for how you're gonna work through the program at that stage. So we make ourselves as available to students as they need. In terms of library resources, there are 2 ways to access the library. You can access it remotely. You get credentials every semester as a CUNY student, and there's a login information, there's an ID and a password, and so you can access the library from the comfort of your own home, or you can go physically to the library. And we share Baruch's library. If you're familiar with Baruch College, it's very close to us, and it's a beautiful, wonderful, fully stocked library. Another question, if my program requires a practicum or internship experience, will the department assist me in finding an appropriate placement in my community? I'm not sure what you mean by your program. So if you can tell me a little bit more about that, I can I can help you a little bit more, but our program does not require a practicum or internship experience. So that's not something that you would be required to do as part of our program. What types of benefits are available? Teaching assistantships, research assistantships, and fellowships. There are no teaching opportunities at SPS. We hire only faculty who have PhDs. So a student who only has a bachelor's degree and is enrolled in a master's program wouldn't be able to teach any of our courses at the undergraduate level. And in terms of CUNY in general, usually the rule of thumb is that if someone has a master's degree, they can teach at the community college level. If they have a PhD, they can teach at the senior college level, although those lines get a little bit blurred. But if you're asking about teaching assistant positions, which is something different, we are currently developing those kinds of opportunities throughout SPS, not just the psychology program. Same with research assistantships, and we don't offer fellowships. Fellowship, it depends on what kind of fellowship you're talking about. A lot of fellowships happen outside of the program, and people usually apply directly to those fellowships. So we wouldn't have anything to do with that, although you'd be happy to reach out to the Career Services Office and they can help you prepare the documents for that. So I see that this question is, how much is the program without a scholarship? Great question. Most students end up paying for the program either out of pocket through some kind of tuition reimbursement program with their employer. So I would urge you to check with your employer to see if you have that available to you, or through loans. The program cost depends on how you move through the program. So at CUNY, there are costs per semester for full-time students. There's a flat rate, and then there is a part-time rate by credit. Most of our students, in fact, all of them, I think with the exception of one student that's ever come through the program, attends part-time. And that's because most of our students have lots of other things going on in their lives. And that's part of the reason why they're drawn to an online experience, because they can't attend face-to-face. And that's why this program was actually conceived. We have wonderful programs in psychology around CUNY, and they're all face-to-face. So some students just weren't able to go to graduate school at any of these different CUNY programs because they couldn't attend face-to-face. And so that's why this program was developed. So in that case, what happens is most of the students take 2 classes, some take 3, because it ends up being about 12 to 15 hours of coursework per class per week. So if you're taking 2 classes, you can plan on about 24 to 30 hours of coursework. If you're taking 3 classes, that obviously increases to about 36 to 40 or so hours per week. And so in order to be full-time, someone would have to take 4 classes. Now you're up to 48 to 60 hours of coursework per week, and most students cannot do that. So I'll give you the part-time rate because I think that's the one that's most applicable to the majority of our students. When all is said and done and students move through the program part-time and pay per credit, it comes out to be around $16,000, which, if you know about the price of college graduate education, it is a steal. And we really pride ourselves on the tuition rates at CUNY. It's the largest public university system in the United States. And one of the things that we try to do is make education accessible to all. And part of that is through our reasonable tuition and high quality education. Someone has a question. I have a bachelor's in journalism from another country. How is the equivalence of international academic credentials verified? Great question. You would actually want to contact our admissions office and they would get you in touch, or you can go look on our website. You'd have to go through an outside agency, and there's a list of what agencies are appropriate, and they would actually do the evaluation for those credits, and then they would send that to us, and then we would evaluate them based on their assessment, which is pretty standard for graduate programs. Other questions? Let me me see, I think I see a couple more. Scroll down. What if your GPA is under a 3.0? Good question. So if your GPA is substantially lower than a 3.0, I would advise you to take courses as a non-degree student. So if you go to our bachelor's program or to admissions, there's an area called non-degree, and you can apply to take courses with us not as a degree student. And I would suggest taking courses to raise that GPA. Specifically, you should take those pre-admission courses if you don't have them: Introduction to Psychology, Statistics, and Research Methods. Check with us first though, because we want to make sure you're taking the right research methods course, because we offer two. And we want to make sure that you're taking Psych 302, which is the one that you need, and the correct statistics class. There are several statistics classes around SPS. We want you to take Psych 301, which is our statistics for psychology. If you already have those courses, I would suggest taking courses that line up with the tracks. So if you don't have taken IO psychology, you might want to take psychology of work or organizational development in our undergraduate program. If you've never taken a developmental course and you want to apply to the developmental program, take courses like risk and resilience in childhood or developmental psychology to get that GPA up. If you're barely missing the 3.0, you have a 2.95, a 2.9, I would suggest addressing that, or a 2.8. Address that in your personal statement, why that is not a good indication of how you can do or how you will perform in graduate school. And I would encourage you to write that in. But just keep in mind that we don't dip too far down below a 2.8. So 2.7 is really borderline and usually not high enough, but it really depends on how close you are to a 3.0. Oh, someone says it's 2.95. I would apply and just address that in your personal statement. Someone asked, for the Capstone project, how much freedom would I have to come up with an idea? Does it have to be developmental or IO psychology? And do I have the option to take any classes in person? So there are no classes in person in psychology, so it's not an option. In terms of the Capstone project, actually, let me go back for a second. While students cannot take classes in person, we have a lot of events around campus through the psychology program, and those do happen both in person and then they're also simulcast. So we also always make them available to our students who cannot make it to campus, either because of other responsibilities or because they don't live near the campus. So we always broadcast them as well, or we at least try to have some version of that happening so that students can participate remotely. But we do have on-campus activities. So there are opportunities to be in person with faculty and other classmates, not in a classroom environment though. For the Capstone project, in terms of freedom, yes, it does have to be a developmental or IO psychology project. If you're a developmental student, that's actually one of the key criteria in the guidelines, or an IO student. It must highlight and showcase your track. So it would have to be aligned with whatever your track is. In terms of the freedom to come up with an idea, students have a pretty open range of opportunities. We don't give students a list and say pick from these topics. They do get to decide what their topic is. However, it must abide by ethical research requirements. It must have must align very well with the track. And as long as that's the case, it cannot be clinical. We have a disclaimer on the Capstone project that it cannot have anything to do with anything clinical psychology or related to clinical psychology. So if you're planning on studying things like depression or mental health, et cetera, that's not what we do here at SPS. And so we don't allow students for liability purposes to do studies like that. But other than that, students have a lot of leeway in what their topics are. We want it to be something you're interested in because you have to live with it for a year. So the more you love it, the less like work it feels. Do you offer a PhD in IO psychology? We don't offer PhD programs at our campus, but you can attend a PhD program through CUNY. I would suggest looking at Baruch's program. Theirs is very well known, a very high quality IO psychology program, very visible. So they would be a really great place to look. Do students have a work study option? We do not have a work study option. What CUNY colleges offer psychology programs? You can go to the CUNY, the main CUNY website, and you can look there. It has every single college, and it notes which programs are at which schools. So there are over 24 CUNY campuses, so you're going to have to kind of do a little bit of looking around. It's structured by subdiscipline, so it will have all of the mental health programs, all of the IO programs, developmental, et cetera, all listed there, so you can find them there. I see a couple other questions. What school is SPS? Maybe you can give me a little bit more information. I'm not sure what you mean. The CUNY School of Professional Studies is its own, it's a school within the CUNY Graduate Center. We're one of the campuses of the Graduate Center. So the CUNY Graduate Center is the doctoral, the PhD granting arm of CUNY. And we are one of the schools within the Graduate Center, but we don't offer PhD programs on our campus. We offer master's programs and bachelor's programs and certificate programs. I have a psychology and accounting degree. Can the letter of recommendation come from an accounting professor? Absolutely, yes. I have taken some psychology courses with my bachelor's in advertising. How will they count towards a master's degree? Will I have to take them again? No courses from a bachelor's degree count in a master's program ever, in any graduate program. It's a different level, of course. And so bachelor's programs are never counted towards master's programs. Any other questions? Well, I want to give you some information, contact information, if things do come up. Sometimes after you've kind of mulled things over, once this is over, students come up with, or applicants come up with questions, and they want to know where they can go to ask questions. So if you go to the top part of the slide, you'll see psychology@sps.cuny.edu. That's the best place to email if you have questions. Don't worry, it's not going to get lost in the abyss. The reason why we send people there is because there are several eyes on that account every single day. And so you'll get a response. They're quicker than anything. Sometimes people send them to me, and I'm the next line, Dr. Marquez Lewis, the director of the psychology program. I not only teach my own classes, I also oversee both the master's program and the bachelor's program. So if you send it to me, the chances of getting a really fast response, I might not see your email just due to the high volume of emails that I get every day for a couple of days. So it's better to direct it to that psychology program because there's several of us that are looking into that. The next person is Isabel Alicia. Dr. Alicia is the associate director of the program. And then Ms. Nakia Isaac, who is the academic program specialist and graduate student advisor. So we all look at that email address, and one of us will respond to you. So please use this email address at the top, psychology@sps.cuny.edu. Are there any other questions? Feel free to type them in the chat box. Okay, great question. Someone said, can developmental psychology be a good bridge for a PhD in clinical psychology? Yes, it can. And in fact, we have several students in our developmental psychology program who have intentions of going to a PhD program in clinical psych. Keep in mind, though, that it's not going to cover things like traditional clinical type of questions, but it is a good, clinical type courses, but it is a good bridge. I took research methods and statistics in the sociology department. Will this fulfill the requirements? We don't know, unfortunately. What would happen is, just as I described the process when students when new students onboard into the program, they have a one-on-one advisement call and sketch out their plan. And part of that is when we assess whether or not they have any transfer credits. At the same time, we'll assess whether or not the undergrad versions of courses, pre-admission courses, can be waived based on work you've done before. So for example, if I were looking at your transcript and I didn't see psychology or research methods for psychology or statistics for psychology, we might flag you and you'd get an email saying you've been accepted in the program as a conditional admit pending completion of research methods and statistics. That doesn't mean that you have to take those yet. It means that we don't see them and we can't assess 100% that you have that. So as part of your onboarding, we would have you fill out a form. Again, it's a one-page form. It's very quick and easy. And you would submit the syllabus for that research methods and that statistics course. If it matches the same content that we have in our courses, then we would waive that. And then, those pre-admission courses requirements would disappear and you would be what's called the direct admit, meaning you didn't owe any courses, there's nothing you had to fulfill, and you go right into the graduate program. So we would assess that at the time that you have your advisement call. Great question. Okay, someone asked, is research methods the same as experimental psychology? Usually, yes. I live out of state. Is the tuition rate the same? Great question. Yes, it actually is. For online programs, the tuition is the students who are out of state pay in-state tuition for online programs. Is there a time frame when we should have these classes completed? For example, taken within the last 5 years? No, we don't have that requirement. Some schools do. We're really of the mindset that if you've had the course and you feel comfortable that you have that information, then we will allow it. However, what I always say to students is research methods and statistics are very difficult classes. They're very rigorous. And so if you're walking into them blind, having only taken a class in 1970 of research methods and stats, and you haven't had a job that has anything to do with those two things, and you don't remember anything, you will struggle in those two classes because it's advanced research methods and advanced statistics. So a lot of students, even though they have had those courses, they still say to us, I think I'm gonna go ahead and take them just to refresh my memory and so that I'm not struggling. Because the last thing you want is to get into those two classes, not get good grades, dip below the GPA requirement to remain in good standing, and then end up on probation or worse, be dismissed from the program. So you want to set yourself up for success, but we don't have a time requirement for us in the program. These are all really great questions. Thanks for sending them. If you have any more questions, feel free to add them. Okay. Well, I hope this was really helpful. If you have any additional questions, again, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at psychology@sps.cuny.edu. And we look forward to reviewing your application if you decide to apply. The last thing I will say before I let you go is that you really want to do your homework. And I mean that not about, any particular school. I mean that about all of the schools, including us. You want to make sure that the school that you're going to be attending is a good fit for you, that it's going to get you where you want to go. Because the last thing that you want to do is end up in a program that you really didn't research fully, that you're not quite sure, because you're going to be spending a lot of time and money and, emotional, intellectual resources. So you just want to make sure that it's a good program for you. So do your research, ask questions, do your due diligence, and certainly in the case of us, we really welcome interactions with you. So we look forward to seeing you, hopefully, for those of you who decide to apply. And I hope you have a really great evening. Thanks for taking the time to spend the evening with me today. Thank you.